Hello, I'm Robert Costa, and this is the Washington Week podcast. It's the first week of 2019, and the 116th Congress was sworn in, with Nancy Pelosi taking the helm of the House of Representatives and the Democrats now in the majority. It's a historic Congress for many reasons, and joining me to discuss it all, Nancy Cortez, Chief Congressional Correspondent for CBS News, Andrea Mitchell, NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and anchor of Andrea Mitchell Reports, Dan Balls, Chief Correspondent for The Washington Post, and Carl Hulse, Chief Washington Correspondent for The New York Times. This new congressional class is one of firsts, the first two Native American women, the first Muslim women, the youngest woman ever elected to Congress, the first African American women from several states, and the first female senators from several states. There are 127 women now in Congress, a new high, and there are other significant signs of diversity. The highest number of African Americans in the House, 53, with 56 in Congress overall. There are 42 Latino members, a new record, and there are 10 LGBTQ members, the most ever. Several members of this Congress have also served in Iraq and Afghanistan. How will the variety of backgrounds and experience change legislation coming from Capitol Hill and the whole scene? Andrea, we were just talking about the images from that House floor vote for Speaker. What stood out to you about this new Congress?
The gender issue, I mean, the women, the fact that Nancy Pelosi was up there, and again, as she had done in 2007 when she took the gavel, she invited the children. Now her grandchildren, her 9 grandchildren, are a good deal older, and there are more of them. But the fact that there were so many kids, it's always family day on the first day of the House. I used to cover the House and love it. But this was so cool. And Dan, your newspaper pointed out that it took till 2011 for there to be a ladies' restroom off the floor of the House, and for the first time there was a line for the restroom. So that was another thing. It just was very different. The color, the ethnicity, the dress, very exciting, very emotional for anyone who loves politics and loves Congress.
You've been keeping an eye on this new class in the House. What do you make of it, Dan?
I think it's a remarkable group. I mean, one, just by the sheer size. It's obviously the biggest new class of Democrats since the Watergate babies after the 1974 election. But as we've said 100 times, the diversity of this group, and the diversity of all types. There's obviously ethnic diversity, racial diversity, but there's also diversity in experience. I mean, there are people who have no experience in government who are already forces, and there are people who have real experience in government who have come in with an idea of how they want to try to fit in. And so they have a collective sense that they can do something simply because of the sheer numbers that they have, that they may have power to do some things. I think what they're wrestling with collectively as a group is, how do we do that? What do we actually do? Where do we try to make our emphasis as a group? And in talking to a number of them over the last few days, they're not quite there on that yet, but they know that they have the potential to be a truly historic class beyond just the numbers.
And we talk so much, Dan, about the outsiders in this class. Haley Stevens from Michigan, what do you make of her?
Well, I got to know her before the swearing in and spent some time with her yesterday on Thursday. She was a person who, in the 2008 campaign, prepared the briefing book for Hillary Clinton. And if you can imagine a more daunting task, I mean, Hillary Clinton actually read her briefing book. Mm-hmm. She got her start doing that. She then went into the Obama administration. She described for me, she said, we're in a chaotic moment here with the government shutdown, but she said, I remember 10 years ago, I was at the Treasury Department, and we were facing an economic crisis, and we were facing GM and Chrysler about to go under, and we had to figure out how they were going to get paid to avoid liquidation. So she has looked at government up close, worked at it in a deep way. She wants to be, as she said, we want to be the doers. She said the class of 74, they were the reformers. We're going to be the doers.
Nancy, you spent part of Friday covering the new member, Rashida Tlaib, the first, I believe, Palestinian-American woman to serve in Congress. She said the expletive about President Trump in remarks following the swearing in on Thursday. What does that story tell us about this new class?
Well, she said on Twitter, even after the uproar, I'm unapologetically me. Basically, I'm not going to say I'm sorry, and I'm not going to change. And, she is not the only new member. coming in with an attitude that, I'm authentic. That's why I was elected, and I may have some rough edges, but deal with it. And the interesting thing, you talked about harnessing, that talent. The interesting challenge for Democrats is that if they're going to get anything done, if they're going to achieve any of their priorities over the next couple of years when they don't control the Senate and they don't control the White House, they are going to need to win in the court of public opinion. They're basically going to have to pass bills in the House and then marshal the public to their side to pressure the Senate to take up this legislation. Already a very tall order. What's the best way to do that? By having great communicators who are great on social media. And they have some very, very talented young communicators who are unpredictable. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told 60 Minutes, "You want to call me a radical? Fine, I'm a radical," which is not a label that a lot of politicians are usually very comfortable with. So they are going to provide a challenge for Democratic leadership, but if they can harness that talent, and that youth, it could work very well to their advantage.
The Instagram class.
Yeah.
That's what this.
Is that your new moniker for them,
I
Carl?
just made it up.
It's good.
Well, we'll see when that lands in the Times. I don't know. It's a real thing. Carl, what do you make, though, not only of the new members, but the new stars of this new Congress? The nominating speeches for the speakership. You had Hakeem Jeffries from New York, and then on the Republican side, Liz Cheney of Wyoming, daughter of Dick Cheney, the former vice president, nominating Kevin McCarthy.
Who is going to be, she's showing, that they're going to remain conservative. Here's Dick Cheney's daughter in there. I think Hakeem Jeffries did an outstanding job, according to his colleagues. They were all very impressed by him and thought that was a really great introduction for him to the public. I mean, he's obviously, they're casting about in the House, the Democrats, for some new blood, younger people, and he obviously made his mark. I think the interesting thing to me about the Democrats here is, in some ways, they've already won because they have this new class that more reflects society. The House politics is slow, the transition is slow, and the Democrats kind of caught up this time with, these are people who represent all sorts of Americans. And to your point about policy, I don't think it has to affect policy because these are people in all sorts of walks of life. They're going to be looking at things like, hey, I live in the real world. Here's how we need this policy to be. I think there can be a beneficial effect. For the Republicans, it's sort of a problem. I think they lost 10 women.
Right.
So they have
half the women that they had before, and they didn't have that.
Aren't the new Republicans more Trumpy?
Right.
To use a word.
But you look out there now, you look over at the Democratic side, which we all did side by side, and you go, wow, look at that complexion of that group. And then the Republicans are more male, more white, I presume.
And conservative.
So.
And more
older.
Conservative. Yeah.
And
older.
the other thing is, Dan's absolutely right about the generational issue. One thing that just stood out to me today was Ocasio-Cortez was being zapped by the Republicans for
dancing.
They found a video of her doing a riff to Breakfast Club. And it's quite charming, and it's really very funny. She was in college. She has a Boston, University sweatshirt on, and they made a big deal out of it, that this is terrible. She was on a roof, and she's dancing, and it's a great takeoff on a very popular movie. And the fact is that they're tone deaf in taking her on about that. And she went right on Twitter and did another dance in the halls of Congress.
Yeah, they backed off pretty quickly.
We should all be so lucky to have a video like that leaked about us.
But that's the point.
Look what a great dancer I was in college.
Don't you forget about me from that movie? I don't think anyone's going to forget about her.
How effective? So she has, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez now has, I believe, more Twitter followers than Speaker Pelosi. What's the mark of effectiveness for her? Is it going to be actually muscling through a Green New Deal through the House, or is it just building a national profile?
I think it is. I think it is leveraging a national profile to keep pushing for as ambitious progressive agenda as she can get. When I was up in the House on Thursday, her office is right next to Congresswoman Stevens, and so there was a big crowd outside, and she came out at one point to do a little scrum with reporters. And somebody asked her about the rules package. There had been issues in the rules package that the Democrats were presenting that the progressives didn't like, a return to pay-as-you-go. And she was asked about that, and basically what she said was two things. One is, I think the people who did this, who put this together, did a very good job. There's a lot in here. I mean, it was a careful answer.
That's impressive.
But she also said, but on this particular issue, I don't think it behooves Democrats to have this if they are also pushing for Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, a big infrastructure plan. I mean, she was able to kind of bifurcate with her answer in a way that suggested to me she's not just going to, just kind of throw stuff up at the wall. She's going to try to keep the pressure on to push a progressive agenda.
I don't remember a House freshman getting this attention ever. Can you think of anything comparable? It's extremely unusual. I mean, incoming members of the House do not usually jump to the top of the TV
and it also,
demand.
When you think about the way the Senate used to work, when Hillary Clinton came to the Senate and I was covering her, she waited. She did not give a speech.
Put your head down.
She didn't do any interviews. She let Barbara Mikulski take the lead on everything, who was the senior senator then among the women of the Women's Caucus. And this is more like what Elizabeth Warren did when Warren came to the Senate and grabbed the attention and was very, strident among her colleagues. In fact, to the point where Harry Reid at one point called Susan Collins, I was told, and apologized for the way that Warren had behaved in an interview on ABC, a group interview of all the women.
Final thoughts, Nancy?
Well, I think it's interesting that Ocasio-Cortez seems to have become an object of fascination, almost more so to Republicans than to Democrats.
They probably see her as a future presidential threat.
They must, or there's something about her that confounds them when, when all 435 members of the House were voting for Speaker. Republicans were mostly silent as 200 Democrats all voted for Nancy Pelosi. But when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who had said she was going to vote for Nancy Pelosi, so it was not a surprise, voted for her, they booed. And some people said, oh, they were booing in jest. But, what was it about this freshman, 29 years old, voting for the Speaker that, that led them to respond that way? So it's going to be interesting to see how she riles at both parties.
That's it for this edition of the Washington Week podcast. You can listen wherever you get your podcast or watch on the Washington Week website. I'm Robert Costa. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time.